Part 41. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji-Sheng Chang. Chapter 401. When Lin Yu saw the old man's hesitant expression, he knew that there must be a story about the old man, so at this moment he turned his head, glanced at the old man, and then said this smiled. "Grandpa, what did you want to say just now? Today is also a happy day, why not just tell me what's on your mind?" As Lin Yu spoke, he poured a glass of wine for the old man. At this time, the old man's wrinkled face suddenly showed a bit of vicissitudes of life. "Well, I am an old guy. I haven't mentioned what happened back then to anyone in many years, and no one wants to hear what I said. It's just some pretentious things, so there's no need to talk about it." After Lin Yu heard what the old man said, he also waved his hands and smiled. "Grandpa, look at what you said. Others don't like to hear what you said, but I like to hear it. You'd better tell me about it." Maybe it was because he had been suppressed in his heart for a long time, or maybe it was because of some other reasons, but at this time, the old man who had been silent for a long time suddenly spoke up. "This incident should actually have happened 40 years ago, when I was only in my 20s. At that time, I had a gentle and virtuous wife, and a smart and lovely child. There were successive storms outside that year. In fact, at the beginning, although our family's conditions cannot be said to be wealthy, they are still just passable. We have an acre of land and can barely make ends meet. However, everything happened that year." When the old man said this, he stopped immediately. He finished the wine in the glass with just one word, and a trace of tears actually flowed out of his cloudy eyes. "The year-round storm that year left me with no harvest. Actually, it doesn't matter. I can't grow any crops in the ground. The worst I can do is get some sandworms to eat. But. The old man coughed heavily. At this time, Lin Yu felt a slight pain for no reason. What happened next? Later on, although we had no income, we still had to pay taxes. If my family couldn't pay the taxes, they could only use their fields to offset the taxes. If we couldn't pay the money, my family's fields would be gone. The storms that had lasted for several years had made it difficult for us to pay taxes. There was nowhere for everyone to find food. I still remember that night, when I went back, my wife and son were gone." After the old man finished speaking, he took another sip of wine, and then started laughing wildly. He looked like he was completely crazy. However, Lin Yu did not stop the old man. He just looked at it from the side. He didn't even know what to say. At this time, the old man turned his head and glanced at Lin Yu. "Do you think they thought I was poor, so they ran away?" Lin Yu shook his head and said nothing. At this time, the old man just smiled like this. "You guessed wrong. No, they didn't think I was poor, but they were taken away. Later I heard from neighbors that after a while, officers and soldiers came and took both of them. When he was captured, did you know what military rations were?" Lin Yu continued to shake his head. The old man just spit out two words from his mouth so coldly: "Human flesh." At this time, Lin Yu only felt as if there was a big stone pressing on his heart, making him unable to breathe at all. At this time, Lin Yu only felt a little bitter, and everything would be fine. The old man suddenly smiled. "Maybe." At this time, Lin Yu opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but the old man just smiled and glanced at Lin Yu, with a bit of desolation in his eyes. "I'm a little tired, so I'll take a rest first." When Lin Yu heard the old man say this, he nodded and smiled so gently. "Okay, then you should go to bed early." At this time, Lin Yu suddenly felt a very special aura. After recuperating for such a long time, Lin Yu's injury was almost healed, so when he felt this aura, his expression turned slightly. After a moment of concentration, a special color flashed through his eyes. "Although I don't know where it is, maybe I should go take a look. When Lin Yu thought of this, without saying a word, he just rushed outside like this. In fact, although materials here are poor, it is only in the slum. In fact, among the upper class people, materials are relatively not in short supply. At this time, Yechiu seemed to have noticed Lin Yu's presence. He steadied himself, then turned his head and glanced coldly at Lin Yu. I didn't expect that there would be an expert like you in Xiakan district. This really surprises me. Yechiu's eyes were fixed on Lin Yu, and at this moment, Lin Yu smiled, and then glanced at Yechiu. You did call me, which is a bit unexpected. Your aura seems to be a bit good, but your own strength is not that good. It seems that you must have received guidance from an expert, and I don't know why, the aura on your body sometimes, you must not be able to control this power, so that's why you're like this. Lin Yu spoke unhurriedly like this, with a somewhat meaningful smile on his lips and a hint of teasing in his eyes. At this time, Yechiu's expression suddenly condensed, and his eyes were fixed on Lin Yu. Who are you? Lin Yu just smiled. You don't need to care about who I am for the time being. I have something to tell you. The strange beast in your body is in a bad condition now. It should be seriously injured, so you'd better find a way to heal it. After hearing what Lin Yu said, Yechiu also bowed respectfully to Lin Yu. Senior, if you have time tomorrow, please come to the beach to meet at this time. When Lin Yu heard Yechiu say this, his pupils suddenly enlarged. There is a sea in this desert. Why can't I see it? After hearing what Lin Yu said, Yechiu raised his eyebrows slightly. Senior, don't you know? There is indeed a sea here, but it is covered by a barrier, so if you don't observe carefully on weekdays, you can't find that place. Lin Yu nodded slightly. Where is the place you are talking about now? 10 miles west of the city. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 402. After Lin Yu heard Yechiu say this, he nodded lightly. Okay, see you tomorrow. After Lin Yu finished speaking, he turned around and left. At this moment, Yechiu's eyes were staring straight at Lin Yu's back, with a look of complete disbelief in the corners of his eyes and brows. This senior's strength is unfathomable. I hope he can heal the blue sea lazuli beast's injuries this time. After Yechiu finished speaking, he immediately turned around and left. And when Yechiu arrived at his home, he felt several unusual auras. After thinking of this, Yechiu also had a look of helplessness on his face. I didn't expect them to come again. At this time, Su Jian also felt the special aura outside the Ye family. 10,000 grass and mud horses were galloping past in Su Jian's heart. At this time, Su Jian was whispering in the room, I didn't expect that I still couldn't escape even though I hurriedly ran so slowly. Forget it, let's see the situation clearly later and then take the opportunity to escape. At this moment, Su Jian's voice was clearly heard by Yechiu. At this time, Yechiu slowly walked in. At this moment, Su Xian's expression was suddenly startled when she saw Yechiu. She smiled awkwardly. Why are you back so soon? Yechiu just smiled. The injury of the blue sea lazuli beast healed faster today, so naturally it came back a little earlier. At this time, Su Jian also nodded lightly. At this time, Su Jian was thinking, he couldn't have heard what I just said. After Su Jian thought of this, she turned her head and glanced at Yechiu. Then she coughed lightly, and then said slowly, Mom is still in the lobby, waiting for me. It's your birthday. A hint of warmth appeared on Yechiu's face for an instant, and then he sighed leisurely, alas. What's wrong? Su Jian's eyes flashed with concern, but at this moment Yechiu just smiled, and then waved his hand casually, it's nothing, I just remembered something. In the lobby. Chiu Huilan's eyes clearly flashed with a bit of worry. Kaiokyu, what's going on? Yechiu's expression darkened, but then a smile appeared on his face. Don't worry, Mom, it's nothing. They might be my friends. They might be here to celebrate my birthday. I'll go check it out. Chiu Huilin was not a fool. Of course she knew that Yechiu seemed to be lying to her, but Chiu Huilin did not continue to ask. After Yechiu finished speaking, he walked out directly. Yechiu came to the door of the room, opened it, and then saw a few guys wearing Tianbao Company uniforms standing at the door. The gangsters stared at Yechiu with smiles on their faces. You must be Yechiu. I often hear Lao Ye mentioning you. You are indeed a talented person. Chen Tao is a typical smiling tiger. Although this guy looks smiling and harmless on the surface, secretly, he might be able to plot against your 8 generations of ancestors, which is very hateful. Especially when it comes to stabbing someone in the back, Chen Tao does it a lot. Su Jian was in the house like this, but she didn't know what was happening outside. It's Brother Chen, right? How did Brother Chen know that it's my birthday today, and why did he come to celebrate my birthday? Chen Tao was also slightly stunned, and at this moment, the man behind Chen Tao with a shoulder-length dragon tattooed on his arm just pushed Yechiu away. Boy, you're celebrating your birthday, right? You owe other people money, but you're still in the mood to celebrate your birthday. Let me celebrate your birthday properly today. At this time, the man spoke and swung his arms in an attempt to slap Yechiu. Although Yechiu looks tall, thin, and frail, the green gold beast in his body is not a vegetarian. At this time, Yechiu was so clever that he stretched out a hand and gently drew a circle with his wrist, and then released the force. Ma San'er didn't pay attention, because the strength in his hand suddenly became unbalanced, and then he fell back and sat down. The few boys around here directly supported Ma San. Ma San was also furious at that time. Boy, if I don't take off one of your arms today, I'll just pretend I've never been around. Ma San said and rushed towards Yechiu. At this time, Yechiu's eyes widened with anger, his eyes were fixed on Ma San'er, and he seemed to have a bit of murderous intent. Chen Tao is a typical smiling tiger. He can clearly sense that the aura of Yechiu at this moment is different. Su Jian also looked curious. She was curious as to why the group of people hadn't come in yet, so she secretly ran to one side of the entrance and took a peek. At this moment, Su Jian happened to see the scene where Yechiu had just taken action to repel Ma San'er. Su Jian's mouth opened into an O shape, as if she could fit an egg into it. This guy usually doesn't show off his abilities. He looks gentle, thin, and weak, and his health is not very good. But he actually pushed Ma San, who was carrying a high-level beast, out like this. He looked quite relaxed. Could it be that he is hiding something from me? Chen Tao glanced at Yechiu. After all, I know your father, and I don't want to force you to death, but someone has to pay the debt. We are all doing business, and my money is not blown by the wind, right? Yechiu glared at Chen Tao fiercely, and then gritted his teeth and said, "Give me 3 days, I will pay you back, but don't think I don't know what you two have done." Chen Tao obviously didn't pay attention to the threats of Yechiu, a young man, but he could see that Yechiu was like an anxious rabbit. I'm afraid that if anyone presses him again, he will bite him. Obviously Chen Tao didn't want to be the first one to get bitten, so he just smiled. Okay, 3 days, right? We're all men. Today, for your father's sake, I'll trust you again. Have a good birthday. After Chen Tao finished speaking, he led his men away. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 403. Okay, 3 days, right? We are all men. Today, for the sake of your father, I will trust you again and have a good birthday. After Chen Tao finished speaking, he led the people away. Su Jian, who was in the distance, was shocked and dumbfounded when she saw this scene. How is it possible? Let this guy go so easily. Yechiu took a deep breath and tried not to let any expression about this matter appear on his face. In just an instant, he returned to his previous appearance. He and Su Jian came to the dining table. Chiu Huilin had already prepared a sumptuous dinner, but this meal was not very good because they both had their own worries. The next night, after Yechiu sent Su Jian back, he went to the beach as agreed and took a slow walk. Before that, Lin Yu felt curious and rushed to the beach first. Sure enough, about 10 miles west of the city, there is an extremely secret barrier. This barrier is not strong, and anyone with a high-level alien beast can enter it. But just after Lin Yu entered the barrier, he saw what seemed to be a tall figure in the distance, slowly walking towards the water. After Lin Yu saw this scene, his expression suddenly changed. Is this lunatic planning to jump into the sea? After Lin Yu thought of this, he didn't hesitate for a moment, and suddenly ran towards that figure. The woman's eyes were empty, as if she couldn't feel the coolness of the sea water and allowed herself to be swallowed up by the sea water. At this time, Lin Yu ran to the beach. Without saying a word, he didn't even have time to take off his clothes, and suddenly jumped down. This crazy woman. At this time, the woman's eyes were also in a trance. She only felt that she saw a tall and handsome figure when she was confused, and then she fainted. Fortunately, Lin Yu's water skills were pretty good and he actually rescued the woman. After he rescued the woman, he realized that her figure and face were both top-notch, even compared to Bao Si, who was famous for her coquettishness. Not bad at all. At this time, the woman may have fainted because of choking on the water. Lin Yu glanced at the woman. I didn't mean to take advantage of you. Lin Yu first squeezed the woman's chest to make her spit out water, and then started artificial respiration. It didn't take long for the woman to become conscious. At this time, the woman slowly opened her eyes and saw a man's mouth, moving towards her mouth. The woman let out a scream, then waved her arm and hit the man in the face. At this time, Lin Yu was fine, with quick eyesight and quick hands, and he jumped up in an instant. The woman's eyes were fixed on Lin Yu. You bastard, why do you think so little of me? The woman's eyes seemed to be bursting with fire. Lin Yu also looked like he was about to cry. I said, you are such an ungrateful woman. I saved you, but I didn't expect to repay you with kindness like this. The woman's eyes were red, and her eyes were fixed on Lin Yu. Why did you save me? Why did you save me? The woman was even a little hysterical. After Lin Yu saw the woman like this, he rolled his eyes at the woman angrily, and a slight sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. It seems that I really shouldn't have saved you this time. Why are you so ignorant? At this time, after hearing what Lin Yu said, the woman actually started to cry. Lin Yu felt a little compassion when he saw the woman so sad. What happened? The woman turned her head and glanced at Lin Yu. Her eyes seemed somewhat complicated. Can you help me? At this time, after Lin Yu heard the woman say this, a bit of confusion flashed in his eyes, and his brows seemed to be knitted together. Help you? What can I help you with? Actually, this matter started a month ago. At this time, the woman fell into a kind of memory. A month ago, Ye Lingxiu's distant cousin Ye Hai had evil intentions because of Ye Lingxiu's beauty, so he drugged Ye Lingxiu one night. Ye Lingxiu's heart was quite simple. Of course, she didn't expect that Ye Hai would have such vicious thoughts, so she drank the medicine. However, something went wrong with this drink. However, she happened to catch up with Ye Chen, who had returned from going out. After Ye Chen saw his sister being bullied, he raised his sword without saying a word and wanted to kill Ye Hai, but was stopped by his third uncle. Chen, after all, nothing happened, and this is still your cousin. If you kill him and this matter spreads, I'm afraid it will bring shame to our Ye family. In my opinion, this is a small punishment. Just give him a big warning. Let's do this. Tomorrow I will punish him to go to the retreat room of our Ye family for 3 years. What do you think? Ye Chen heard this, and after his third uncle said this, he turned his head and glanced coldly towards him, with a sneer at the corner of his mouth. 3 years of seclusion, ha ha ha, it sounds so easy. If I do the same to my cousin, I will also go into seclusion for 3 years, okay. After hearing what Ye Chen said, Ye Chen's uncle's face suddenly became ugly, and his eyes were fixed on Ye Chen. What did you say? Seeing his uncle protecting this guy like this, Ye Chen knew that he couldn't kill this guy today, so he swung a sword towards Ye Hai, and then a sword energy suddenly slid down from Ye Hai's side. This sword energy was extraordinary, and Su Qingjian, who had just rushed over, saw it. Su Qingjian's beautiful eyes also flashed with some disbelief. How can there be such a strong sword energy? Who is this little guy? At this time, Su Qingjian's heart was also in turmoil. After the sword energy passed by, Ye Hai let out a scream, because at this moment, one of his arms had been cut off by Ye Chen. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 404. At this time, Ye Chen's third uncle just wanted to get angry. But he was stopped by someone. Third uncle, it doesn't have to be like this. This matter is my father's fault. Don't make it a big deal. After hearing what Ye Long said, Ye Chen's third uncle's eyes clearly showed some confusion. At this time, Ye Long was so calm that it was a bit terrifying. After Ye Hai saw Ye Long like this, his face suddenly turned ugly with pain, and his eyes were fixed on Ye Long. Long you. At this time, Ye Long just took a step forward suddenly, but you hurt my father, we can't just let it go. In 7 days, the two of us will have a life and death showdown. When the time comes, no matter life or death, do you dare or not? How could Ye Chen, a young and energetic young man, be able to suppress the anger in his heart when he was provoked by Ye Long like this? So at this time, Ye Chen also nodded slightly, no problem. After Ye Long saw Ye Chen's promise, he sneered at the corner of his mouth, okay, don't be a coward and dare not accept the challenge. I'm just afraid you'll be like that. The two people were tit for tat. At this time, Ye Long helped Ye Hai up and walked outside. Ye Hai just felt that Ye Long's character was a bit scary, but at this time, he was also full of joy. As for the contract between Ye Long and Ye Chen, although he was quite confident in his son, the talent Ye Chen showed today made him slightly worried. No, we have to think of a perfect solution. Ye Hai said softly like this, already having some ideas in his mind. At this time, Ye Chen held a sword in one hand and stood in the courtyard, blowing the breeze, but he still didn't draw his sword. In the wind, a beauty walked over like this. The beauty was quite quiet. She walked slowly and leisurely in front of Ye Chen. The sword is born from the heart. That sword of yours is a bit scary. The woman suddenly spoke like this. Ye Chen was not unfamiliar with the woman in front of him, but he didn't know why he suddenly came to look for him when he didn't have a deep friendship with this woman. Ye Chen just smiled, "Senior sister is right. When I struck the sword, I just felt that there was something important in my heart that I wanted to protect. Even if there is a Buddha or a demon in front of me, I can kill it." At this moment, Ye Chen was so arrogant that Su Qingjian was quite moved by his fierce momentum. At this moment, Su Qingjian's eyes were staring straight at the young man under the moonlight. In a daze, she seemed to see the shadow of another person. She had only seen that person once when she was young. That person's sword was like his heart was as cold as ice. Su Qingjian was slightly stunned, but she came to her senses after a moment. She picked up a cup of tea and took a sip to cover up the panic in her heart. Ye Chen had a clear insight. He clearly felt the shock in Su Qingjian, but he just smiled and said nothing. Can you still use the sword during the day today? Maybe. I want to see it. Ye Chen hesitated for a moment, then raised his sword directly, and then he suddenly rushed forward. He swung the sword in front of him with the force of splitting Huashan, but the sword energy was still sword intent, but it was still a bit inferior to the one during the day. There was a hint of loneliness in Su Qingjian's eyes, and she just sighed quietly, "Oh, let me just say, maybe everything is just my illusion." After Su Qingjian finished speaking, he stood up directly. "It's getting late, so we need to rest early." Ye Chen nodded, "Thank you, senior sister, for the reminder." Su Qingjian smiled, then turned and left. And when Su Qingjian left for a moment, an ancient tree in the courtyard turned slightly to the side, and then fell to the ground. In fact, Ye Chen just did it on purpose, hiding his clumsiness. Senior sister doesn't understand, and it's best if you don't understand. But at this time, he didn't know that at the corner, that beautiful silhouette had a meaningful smile on its face. I knew that this little guy must still have a backup plan. I didn't expect that his sword intention has become so strong. I'm afraid you will become my junior brother this time. After the woman finished speaking, she turned and left. After the woman left, not long after, a beautiful figure jumped towards Ye Chen. "Brother, look what this is." Ye Lingxiu just held a candied hose and shook it gently in front of Ye Chen. Ye Chen smiled and rubbed Ye Lingxiu's little head. "Silly girl, did you sneak out to buy candied hose on a stick again?" Ye Lingxiu just smiled, and then stuffed the candied hose into Ye Chen's hand. After doing all this, Ye Lingxiu ran away. "It's getting late, I'm going back to rest." Ye Chen's eyes were staring straight at that cheerful figure. At this moment, he only felt a warm current in his heart. Ye Chen gently bit into a candied hose, and the sweetness reached his heart. At this time, Ye Chen clenched his fists, and a bit of determination flashed in his eyes. "Even if we are enemies of the world, what's the harm? Not to mention Amir Ye Long and Ye Hai." At this time, Ye Chen's fighting spirit was overwhelming, and then he suddenly slashed a sword forward. Even Su Qingjian, who was in the courtyard, suddenly opened his eyes at this time. Such a strong sword intent, is there anything else nearby? Is this peerless master in seclusion? When Su Qingjian rushed out of the door, the sword intent seemed to disappear without a trace, like a stone sinking into the sea. Su Qingjian stood in the courtyard for a long time before slowly walking back to the door. At this time, Ye Chen seemed to have touched something faintly, but that feeling only lasted for a moment and then disappeared without a trace. There was only a sword mark on the stone wall in front of him. The mark was neither deep nor shallow. If those who used swords came, they would definitely notice it. But in this small town, there might not be such a person. Even Su Qingjian might not be able to see it. It was getting dark, but Ye Chen was no longer sleepy. He thought of the sword manual and wanted to look through it. Lu family. A figure was holding a cup of tea and sipping it gently, with a look of enjoyment on his face. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Shengchang. Chapter 405. After all, Ye Hai still couldn't calm down, so he rushed to the Lu family early the next morning. Lu Xingyi of the Lu family specialized in doing some shady things in this small city. The Lu family was a horse bandit in the early years. Even though most of the family's fortune has been wiped out now, they still have the entire city's hands on the murder and smuggling business. In Lu Xingyi's arms sat a rather good-looking maid. At this moment, he was moving his hands dishonestly. Although the maid was full of reluctance, she did not dare to mess around due to Lu Xingyi's lustful power. "Say something." At this moment, a man rushed in a panic. Reporting to the head of the family, "People from the Ye family are here to ask for an audience." The man's intrusion disturbed Lu Xingyi's mood. His face turned livid, and then he pushed the maid away and stood up. He came directly in front of the man, and without saying a word, he kicked the man on the chest. The man spit out a mouthful of blood, but still got up with difficulty and knelt on the ground. Who is from the Ye family? Lu Xingyi picked up the teacup, took a sip, and then asked coldly. Yeah, hi. Lu Xingyi suddenly laughed like this. Is that the good-for-nothing whose arm was chopped off by his nephew yesterday? I really don't know how he still has the nerve to come see me today. However, Lu Xingyi also knew that this fear was coming to do something for him. A sneer appeared at the corner of Lu Xingyi's mouth, and a bit of ridicule flashed in his eyes. Forget it, let's ask him to come in. After Ye Hai came in, he explained his purpose and promised to give Lu Xingyi a high-level exotic beast. After hearing what Ye Hai said, Lu Xingyi, of course, also agreed fully. So, that night, Lu Xingyi sent out 3 strong men carrying high-level alien beasts. Of course, Ye Chen could not be their opponent, so he was accidentally killed by them. Even Su Qingjian felt quite emotional after hearing the news. You must know that in her sect, although it is relatively unconventional, the sword cultivators in it are so powerful that they can even compete with epic-level beasts. A battle. They believe that strength relies on themselves, and cannot completely rely on the alien beasts they drive. Ye Lingxiu just cried and talked at the same time. At this time, when Lin Yu heard Ye Lingxiu say this, his expression became slightly condensed. I didn't expect that something like this would happen. My brother died entirely because of me. This thing is all my fault. If it hadn't been for me, this wouldn't have happened. This thing is all my fault. At this time, Lin Yu just patted Ye Lingxiu's shoulder so lightly. For some reason, Ye Lingxiu felt that the tall and handsome young man in front of her had a very special attraction to her. Force. If this is really the case, I think you should not think about seeking death yourself now, but think of ways to take revenge. Lin Yu's eyes were fixed directly on Ye Lingxiu. After hearing what Lin Yu said, Ye Lingxiu also had a bit of a wry smile at the corner of her mouth. There was a complete look in her eyes. It's all a sense of helplessness. You don't know what they mean in the city? Although this small town is small, they exist in this small town like heaven and earth. With my broken body, how can it be possible? Ye Lingxiu said helplessly. At this time, Lin Yu was filled with emotions in his heart. He opened his mouth to say something, but when the words reached his mouth, he seemed to be choked, and there was a hint of helplessness in his eyes. Everything will be fine. A bit of helplessness flashed across Ye Lingxiu's eyes, and a wry smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. Maybe, but I don't think so. And at this time, a man slowly walked over from a distance. The man came to Lin Yu, and then he respectfully saluted Lin Yu. Junior pays homage to senior. Who else could come if it wasn't Ye Xiu? At this moment, Ye Lingxiu's eyes were fixed on Ye Xiu, and a bit of surprise flashed in her beautiful eyes. Is it you? At this time, Ye Xiu also saw Ye Lingxiu. His eyes were full of disbelief. Do you know the senior? Both of them are from the Ye family, so they naturally know each other. However, many years ago, Ye Xiu's father took Ye Xiu and the others away from the Ye family because of disagreements with the elders of the family. At this time, Ye Lingxiu also nodded slightly. What are you doing here? I'm here to help senior. After Ye Lingxiu heard what Ye Xiu said, a strange color flashed through her beautiful eyes, and then she turned her head and stared straight at Lin Yu. But he doesn't have the aura of being pregnant with a strange beast. Why are you going to ask him to help you? At this time, Ye Xiu just smiled. How is it possible? Senior is very powerful. You can't tell his level simply because his level is too much higher than yours. After Ye Lingxiu heard what Ye Xiu said, her beautiful eyes stared directly at Lin Yu, and a strange color flashed in her eyes. At this time, Ye Lingxiu seemed to have made a decision. At this moment, after hearing what Ye Xiu said, Lin Yu just waved his hand and smiled casually. My strength is just like this, but I may be able to save the beast on your body. Call it out first. At this time, after hearing what Lin Yu said, Yechiu nodded heavily, and then his mind moved, and finally the azure blue-gold beast suddenly appeared in front of Lin Yu. The azure blue-gold beast's fur was purple-blue. Originally, the azure blue-gold beast's fur should be extremely pure blue, but now it has become like this, which is obviously a sign of poisoning. The azure blue-gold beast has 2 fangs, and the breath of the azure blue-gold beast is very weak at this time. Not only that, his lips are black, which proves this point. Lin Yu just took a look at the azure gold beast and then smiled. If I'm not mistaken, this beast should have been given to you by a dying person. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 406. After Lin Yu finished speaking, Yechiu's expression was also startled, and then his eyes were fixed on Lin Yu's body. There was a kind of disbelief in the corners of his eyes and eyebrows. How did Senior learn about it? At this time, after Lin Yu heard what Yechiu said, he nodded gently, and a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. So that's the case. If that's the case, then everything really makes sense. The previous owner of this icy pure gold beast must have been poisoned by a third-rate poison master. This poison is actually not difficult to cure. But I need a primary detoxifying pill. After Yechiu heard what Lin Yu said, he was also happy at the time. However, when Yechiu heard Lin Yu say that he needed this detoxifying pill, his face instantly became so gloomy. Alas, sir, I don't know. Where can we find any detoxifying pills in this small town like ours? Even if the detoxifying pills are first grade, they can be considered high-level pills. They are only available in big cities, so. At this time, Yechiu paused as he said this. His eyes were filled with a sense of helplessness, and the corner of his mouth evoked a bit of a wry smile. At this time, Lin Yu heard what Yechiu said. At this time, he turned his head and glanced at Yechiu, with a meaningful smile on his lips. You can't help it, but that doesn't mean I can't. Lin Yu just said this unhurriedly. At this time, after Yechiu heard what Lin Yu said, his eyes were full of joy. At this time, he knelt down directly in front of Lin Yu. If the senior has his way, the junior will repay the favor even if he acts like a cow and a horse. After Lin Yu heard what Yechiu said, a meaningful smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and then he waved his hand gently. It doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. Senior, does he have a preliminary detoxifying pill? At this time, Lin Yu also shook his head. There is no elementary detoxification pill. After Yechiu heard what Lin Yu said, his eyes that were originally full of excitement turned gloomy again at this moment. Then what are you going to do with this blue sea lapis lazuli beast, senior? At this time, Lin Yu suddenly smiled. It is true that I don't have the basic detoxification pill, but I do have the high-level detoxification pill. It is of no use to me to keep it anyway. I just give it away, forget it. After Lin Yu finished speaking, he took out a small white jade porcelain vase from his arms and threw it to Yechiu like trash. At this time, Yechiu and Ye Lingxiu had expressions of disbelief on their faces after seeing this scene. At this time, Ye Lingxiu seemed to have made up her mind. No matter what conditions the senior puts forward, I will definitely let him avenge my brother, even if it is. When Ye Lingxiu thought of this, her pretty face turned slightly red, and then she secretly glanced at Lin Yu. He is quite handsome. I am not at a disadvantage if I am like this. Lin Yu just felt that Ye Lingxiu, this little girl, was a little weird, and she had been secretly looking at him. At this time, Lin Yu just smiled like this. At this moment, he was thinking in his heart, could this little girl like her, come on me. At this time, after Yechiu took the detoxification pill, he came directly to the side of BeastCompanions beast, then opened the medicine bottle, and then gave the pill to BeastCompanions. The beast fed it. At this time, there was only a burst of light green light around the blue sea green gold beast, and then the blue sea green gold bracelet coughed out a mouthful of blood from its mouth. Finally, the breath of the blue sea green gold beast gradually faded away. Recover. At this time, Yechiu's eyes were full of joy, and then he knelt down directly in front of Lin Yu. Thank you, Senior, thank you so much, Senior. For your great kindness, Junior, please don't unforgettable teeth. At this moment, Lin Yu waved his hand gently, it doesn't matter. At this time, Lin Yu glanced towards the blue sea lazuli beast, and the information about the blue sea lazuli beast appeared in front of him. Exotic beast, 5-clawed king dragon advanced level 6, level 49. Qualification, alien, intermediate. Life, 99999. Speed, 99999. Defense, 99,999. Attack, 99,999. Skills, Blue Sea swallows the sky, golden eyes, and fiery eyes. Blue Sea swallows the sky, the blue sea lazuli beast activates its skills, wildly swallowing the surrounding spiritual energy, and then spits out a cyclone from its mouth. The cyclone carries a force that can ignore the enemy's armor. Golden eyes and fire eyes, the blue sea lazuli beast activates its skill and shoots out a flame from its eyes. The temperature of the flame is extremely high. At this time, Yechiu and Yelingxiu simply worshipped Lin Yu as a god. Lin Yu nodded with satisfaction. There is a slight improvement, but it is not a big improvement and is not worth mentioning at all. At this time, Yechiu's eyes were filled with a look of disbelief, and then there was a burst of astonishment on his face. You must know that he originally thought that there was no hope of curing this green gold beast, but now Lin Yu not only cured the disease, but also greatly improved the strength of the blue sea green gold beast. From the original first level of Lord, he was directly promoted to the 6th level. Senior is indeed very powerful, and I am really impressed by this junior. Lin Yu just waved his hand casually and smiled. You and I are destined to be together, so I rescued you. There should be nothing wrong with you now. If there is nothing with you, then I will leave. At this time, Lin Yu was just about to turn around and leave, and then he saw Yelingxiu. He knelt down behind Lin Yu. After Lin Yu saw this scene, his expression was also so faint. He condensed for a moment, and then immediately turned his head and glanced at Yelingxiu, with a bit of confusion flashing in his eyes. What do you mean? Yelingxiu had a hint of crying in her whole body. Please sir, please avenge my brother. As long as you are willing to avenge my brother, Lingxiu is willing to do whatever Lingxiu is asked to do. After Lin Yu heard what Yelingxiu said, he felt quite emotional. Then he shook his head and sighed leisurely. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 407. It's not that I won't help you, but I am serious about this matter and don't want to get into trouble, so. Lin Yu paused immediately after saying this, with a special color in his eyes. At this time, after hearing what Lin Yu said, Yelingxiu's eyes dimmed instantly, and then she looked towards the seaside, and then directly towards the sea. Bian ran over. At this moment, 3 black lines appeared on Lin Yu's forehead, and he was speechless for a while. At this moment, he could not help but curse secretly in his heart. This crazy woman. However, at this time, Lin Yu could not ignore death, otherwise his conscience would never let him go, so at this time, Lin Yu ran directly behind Yelingxiu, and then hugged him from behind. Lived Yelingxiu. Don't be ridiculous. You have a great future now. What about life and death? If you want to die now, then who will avenge your brother? After Yelingxiu heard what Lin Yu said, 2 lines of tears flashed across her eyes. At this time, Ye Lingxiu's eyes were full of tears. "I'm begging you, can you help me?" Ye Lingxiu's eyes were staring straight at Lin Yu. The corners of her eyes and brows were full of a kind of prayer. At this time, Lin Yu was also slightly tangled, and then he was also seriously worried. He sighed. "Oh, it's not that I don't want to help you, it's just that I can't help you with this matter." At this time, Ye Lingxiu struggled towards the outside. "In that case, let me die." 3 black lines appeared on Lin Yu's forehead. At this time, only he knew his own situation. The spiritual power here was simply not enough to support him in summoning powerful beasts such as the space-time beast. Even if he summoned the earth-splitting bear, can't stay in this place for long. Therefore, at this time, Lin Yu could be said to be a wise woman. Even if he possessed high-level alien beasts, it would be absolutely impossible for him to have sex with them for a long time. When Lin Yu thought of this, his face began to look slightly ugly. At this time, Ye Lingxiu seemed to be able to see the confusion on Lin Yu's face. After a while, Ye Lingxiu also sighed quietly, and the bitter smile at the corner of his mouth became more and more obvious. "Okay, I probably understand that it was indeed my fault just now. If you really have no other choice, then let's forget about it for now." At this time, a hint of helplessness flashed across Lin Yu's face. No matter what, since I have promised you, but you must not be in a hurry about this matter, do you understand?" Lin Yu's eyes were fixed on Ye Lingxiu. After Ye Lingxiu heard what Lin Yu said, she nodded her head like a chicken pecking at rice. "Understood, of course I understand. Thank you for your help this time. Your kindness will be unforgettable to Shuer." At this time, Lin Yu just sighed leisurely, and then turned around and left. After he returned home, he felt several different smells on his face. His face began to look a little ugly, and a bit of solemnity flashed across his face, and then he half closed his eyes. A man slowly turned around. The man's eyes were fixed on Lin Yu, and the smile at the corner of his mouth began to become more and more obvious. "Boy, I heard that you took out the demon core of that Lord-level alien beast. If you want to save that old immortal guy, you'd better hand over everything you have to me. Otherwise, it's really going to happen. Don't blame me for being rude to that old guy." A man stared at Lin Yu with a gloomy expression. The corners of his eyes and brows were full of greed. At this time, when Lin Yu heard what the man said, a sneer suddenly appeared on the corner of his mouth, and then he shook his head. "It's interesting. It's really interesting. I didn't expect it. I didn't expect it. I didn't expect you to snatch things from me now. It's really beyond my expectation." After the man heard what Lin Yu said, he also laughed like this. At this time, he seemed to be completely crazy, and his eyes were fixed on Lin Yu. "Interesting, it's really interesting. The little guy dares to say that. It seems that you are quite confident in yourself." The man's eyes were fixed on Lin Yu, and the smile at the corner of his mouth began to become more and more obvious. "I don't know if I'm not confident, but if you're sorry, it's more than enough for you to come." The two people were tit for tat like this. After hearing what Lin Yu said, the man was furious, and then he slammed the table heavily, with even more killing intent. "Okay, very good. If you want to seek death, then don't blame me." After the man finished speaking, and then with a thought, 3 Lord-level alien beasts suddenly appeared behind him. You must know that in this small town, Lord-level alien beasts can be said to be as high as the ceiling. Existence, that's why he was so confident in wanting to rob Lin Yu's things. But this Lord-level beast is not good enough in front of Lin Yu. Lin Yu just smiled, and then shook his head. "Stupid and ridiculous guy, it's ridiculous." After hearing what Lin Yu said, the man was furious, and the murderous intent on his body was released directly. "Boy, I think you are just looking for death. If you want to die, don't blame me. Today, Grandpa will tell you who Grandpa is, so that you don't know who killed you after you go to the underworld. Grandpa will not change his name, and he will not change his surname. Ye Tian, Ye family. At this time, Lin Yu's face condensed slightly after hearing what Ye Tian said, and then frowned. Ye Tian of the Ye family. At this time, Ye Tian, after hearing what Lin Yu said, laughed. Boy, now you know you are afraid. I tell you, it's too late to know it now. You will die today. I said, no matter who can save you. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 408. After Ye Tian said this, he also laughed like this. His eyes were full of a kind of madness, and at this time, after Lin Yu heard what Ye Tian said, there was also a wave of anger on his forehead. 3 black lines. I felt speechless for a while. Whether you let me go or not is your business, but I really don't think you can do anything to me. Lin Yu spoke unhurriedly, and the smile at the corner of his mouth became more and more obvious. Ye Tian has never seen someone be so arrogant in front of him. You must know that his Dark Knight Demon Wolf is a Lord level, and it is also a fellow alien beast. This means that these 3 Lord level hands can cooperate with each other. Even a beast with power comparable to that of a domain lord. Therefore, Ye Tian is already the head of the Ye family when he reaches middle age. He is even more domineering in the city. Except for the legendary city lord, I am afraid no one can be his opponent anymore. Boy, the ignorant are fearless. I really admire your courage. These 3 Dark Knight Wolves will definitely surprise you today. At this time, Lin Yu only saw 3 snow-white demon wolves, with a wisp of red flame-like hair on their heads. Exotic Beast, Night Demon Wolf Lord Level 6, Level 49. Qualification, Alien, Intermediate. Life, 99999. Speed, 99999. Defense, 99,999. Attack, 99,997. Skill, Demon Wolf Ghost Claw, 3-in-1. Demon Wolf Ghost Claws. The Night Demon Wolf activates its skills to strengthen its claws with spiritual power and tear apart its enemies. Its ferocity and cruelty can shock the enemy's mind. 3-in-1, the Dark Knight Demon Wolf activates its skills, and the 3 of them merge into one. Their power is gathered together to defeat the enemy. Together the power is extremely powerful. Although this Dark Knight Demon Wolf may be one of the best in the city, in front of Lin Yu, it is not enough to look at. Lin Yu just shook his head. After waiting for this moment, Lin Yu just thought, and then the earth-splitting bear suddenly appeared behind him. When the earth-splitter bear appeared, the 3 Night Demon Wolves were obviously frightened. At this time, they made whining sounds, seemingly begging for mercy. After Lin Yu saw this scene, the sneer at the corner of his mouth began to become more and more obvious, and then he shook his head. Hey, don't blame me for not letting you go. Who told you, master? Do you have to provoke me? After Lin Yu finished speaking, he waved his hand gently, and then said softly, kill them all, remember to do things cleanly and neatly. After hearing what Lin Yu said, the earth-shattering bear's eyes were full of excitement, and then it suddenly flew directly towards the 3 Night Demon Wolves. After the 3 Night Demon Wolves saw the earth-splitting bear like this, a hint of panic clearly flashed through their eyes. As for the fighting spirit at this time, it was shattered almost in an instant. The earth-splitting bear came to the 3 Night Demon Wolves, stretched out its 2 bear claws and grabbed the 2 earth-hunting bears, and then collided with them in such a crazy way, and then the 2 Dark Knight Demon Wolves unexpectedly started to hit each other. He didn't even have time to resist, so he was beaten into pieces. At this time, Lai Diction let out an angry roar. When Ye Tian saw this scene, he was also shocked and dumbfounded. At this time, his eyes were full of horror. The whole person was frozen on the spot for an instant, not daring to move. Lin Yu's lips curled up into a sneer, and a hint of coldness flashed in his eyes. it seems like you can't kill me now. At this time, the remaining night demon wolf ran away after seeing this scene. He did not want to follow in the footsteps of his two brothers. At this time, Ye Tiangang wanted to take back the night demon wolf, but now at that moment, I saw the fierce earth bear hammering the earth, and then the earth trembled for a while. Then the night demon wolf was directly knocked down, and then the fierce earth bear suddenly rushed forward, waved its huge bear claws, and slapped the earth-splitting bear to pieces again. After doing all this, earth-splitting bear's eyes were full of contempt. At this time, the earth-splitting bear didn't even have time to put on a winner's pose, and was taken back by Lin Yu. You must know that the earth-splitting bear didn't appear for even a second, which was an extremely terrifying waste for Lin Yu. At this time, Ye Tian saw that all three of his natal beasts had been destroyed by Lin Yu. At that time, he was filled with fear. At this time, he had no fighting spirit in his body, and then he suddenly fell to his knees on the ground and kowtowed towards Lin Yu crazily. My lord, please, please, let me go, let me go. When Lin Yu heard what Ye Tian said, a sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. A bit of coldness flashed in his eyes, and the killing intent on his body was even more intense. At that time, I couldn't help but shake my head. If I had known this, why would you want to ask for mercy now? It's too late. After Lin Yu finished speaking, he immediately swung out a sword from his hand, and then Ye Tian's head and body were separated in an instant. At this time, he turned his head and looked at the two people beside Ye Tian coldly, and a few cold lights flashed in his eyes. Where is my grandpa now? Lin Yu said slowly, and the two people heard Lin Yu, and after saying this, they felt like they were falling into an ice cave, and their voices trembled slightly at this time. In. At this time, they pointed to the room, and at this time, for some reason, Lin Yu suddenly had a bit of ominous premonition in his heart. Lin Yu had no time to pay attention to the two people, and suddenly rushed into the room. When Lin Yu came to this room, he saw the scene in the room, and then Lin Yu was stunned. At this time, his eyes were red, and the murderous intent on his body was so awe-inspiring. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 409. At this time, Lin Yu came and saw his grandfather lying in a pool of blood when he entered the room. At this time, his eyes were about to split, and he suddenly felt a little more self-blame in his heart. Grandpa, it's all my fault. This time, it's all my fault. If it hadn't been for me, how could you have been harmed by this traitor? How could you have ended up like this? This matter is all my fault. This matter everything is my fault. I know I was wrong, please wake up, please. At this time, Lin Yu already had a hint of crying. As the saying goes, a good man will not shed tears easily, but he has not yet reached the sad point. Obviously, Lin Yu has already reached this sad point at this time. But at this time, the old man remained motionless, and his body even felt a little cold. At this moment, Lin Yu thought, and the earth-splitting bear suddenly appeared behind him. Go and catch those two guys, I want to live. Lin Yu's tone was unusually cold, without any warmth at all. The earth-splitting bear seemed to understand what Lin Yu said. He and Lin Yu had the same thoughts, so of course he could understand how sad Lin Yu was at this time. At this time, the earth-splitting bear didn't say much nonsense, but simply flew out and plundered toward the outside. At this time, Lin Yu's murderous intent and anger were overwhelming. The two people just ran out, and not long after, they were directly blocked by the earth-splitting bear. The two of them just looked at each other and said, "Run separately." At this time, the two of them were ready to run away separately, But Lai Diction suddenly grabbed one person directly. Before the man had time to react, he was caught by the groundbreaker bear. Then, the groundbreaker bear picked up a small piece of stone. The small piece of stone turned into a bullet and headed directly towards the other person. It hit hard. At the end, I heard a scream coming from the person's mouth, and then the person just fell to the ground with a thump. At this time, his entire leg was completely blown away by the stone. The earth-shattering bear let out an angry roar. After the man heard the earth-shattering bear's roar, the corners of his eyes and brows were filled with a sense of complete panic. At this time, the earth-splitting bear was grabbed, and the two of them rushed in the direction of Lin Yu. When the earth-splitting bear came back, he threw the two people to the ground heavily. Lin Yu's expression also condensed slightly. He slowly turned his head and glanced coldly at the two people, with a bit of murderous intent flashing in his eyes. After the two people felt the gloomy and cold killing intent emanating from Lin Yu, they were extremely panicked at the time, and then they fell to their knees on the ground, kowtowing desperately. "This matter has nothing to do with us, sir. This matter really has nothing to do with either of us. He ordered us to do this. It has nothing to do with us. Yes, that guy asked us to do this. We are also his subordinates. We can only obey his orders. Please, please let me go." When Lin Yu heard what they said, a cold light flashed in his eyes. At this time, there was no emotion in his eyes. At this time, a sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth, and then he said unhurriedly, "Oh, he ordered you to do this, right?" When the person heard Lin Yu say this, he felt suddenly happy. At this time, they were still naive, thinking that there might be a turnaround in the matter, and then they nodded as if they were chickens. Like pecking rice. "Yes, yes, he was the one who ordered us to do this. We didn't want to do this at the beginning, and we tried to persuade him, but it was useless." After Lin Yu heard the two of them say this, he also laughed like this. At this time, Lin Yu seemed to be crazy. At this moment, they looked at each other like this, and suddenly there was a bit of ominous premonition in their hearts. "Ha ha ha, okay, since you are so loyal to your boss, then he has gone to hell now, do you think you should go to hell with him?" Lin Yu said in a cold and unhurried voice. At this time, after the two of them heard what Lin Yu said, they suddenly felt a bit of an ominous premonition in their hearts. At this time, they were just about to escape, and then they were directly caught by Lin Yu. "Come over." Lin Yu took out a dagger from his waist. At this moment, a cold light flashed through him. When he raised the knife and dropped it, the heads of the two people fell to the ground instantly. At this time, Lin Yu could be heard saying through gritted teeth, "Grandpa, don't worry, I will definitely seek justice for you this time. I swear." At this time, Lin Yu was gritting his teeth and talking. The corners of his eyes and brows were filled with a completely cold look. At this time, a murderous intention surged in Lin Yu's chest. And just at this moment, after Lin Yu finished speaking, he stood up directly. At this time, he slowly walked towards the door. At this time, the chill around him seemed to be they condensed into one, and a cold feeling spread quietly. It only took a moment for Lin Yu to arrive. In front of the door of the Ye family, at this time, there was a gloomy look in the corners of his eyes and brows, and the murderous intention on his body was even more awe-inspiring. But at this moment, the doorman of the Ye family blocked Lin Yu's path. At this moment, his eyes were fixed on Lin Yu, and his brows seemed to be knitted together. "Similar. I asked you, what are you doing here? The Ye family is an important place, and all the idle people are waiting to get away quickly, so as not to ask for trouble." The man's eyes were fixed on Lin Yu, and at this moment, Lin Yu suddenly smiled. He just turned his head and glanced at the man coldly. There was also a hint of gloomy murderous intent in his eyes. The people of the Ye family are really powerful. Today I want to see how powerful the people of the Ye family are. After Lin Yu finished speaking, he took a step forward. At this time, the man directly summoned the strange beast. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 410. Lin Yu saw the corner of the man's strange mouth, which was just a bit of a sneer. His eyes were full of mockery, and the killing intent in his body was even more awe-inspiring at this time. It's just that such a low-level beast dares to block me. It's just looking for death. Lin Yu's voice had just faded, and then a blade of spiritual power was scattered from his cuffs, and then the high-level alien beast's head disappeared. At this time, the one who blocked Lin Yu before after the guy saw this scene, the corners of his eyes and brows were filled with a sense of fear. At this time, his whole body was trembling like this. At this time, he couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva, and then he shook his head crazily. No, don't come here, I know it's wrong, I know it's wrong, please let me go, please let me go. At this time, after Lin Yu heard what the man said, the sneer at the corner of his mouth became more and more obvious. Let you go, right? But I don't want to let you go. What do you think I should do? At this time, the man was so frightened that he collapsed on the ground. His eyes were full of helplessness, and there was a bit of a wry smile at the corner of his mouth. At this time, Lin Yu actually smelled the smell of urine, and his face began to become slightly ugly. At this time, he glanced at the man coldly, with a cold light in his eyes. Flash. Forget it, killing you will also dirty my hands. Now you can go in and tell your master that I am here, call your steward out, and give him this gift by the way. After Lin Yu finished speaking, he took out a baggage, and then threw the baggage to the servant. At this time, the servant opened the baggage and saw Ye Tian's face. The head and eyes were wide open, as if they were staring at themselves. At this time, only a scream was heard from the man's mouth, and then the whole person fainted. At this time, everyone in the Ye family also heard the noise outside, and then slowly walked out. Their eyes were fixed on Lin Yu, and a murderous intention came out. This spreads. Boy, you are so brave. You actually dare to come to our Ye family to cause trouble. Maybe you are just tired of living. At this time, after Lin Yu heard their voices, he turned his head and glanced coldly at them, with a sneer at the corner of his mouth. I don't know if I am tired of living, but if you dare to talk to me like this, you must be tired of living. After Lin Yu finished speaking, he suddenly rushed forward. His speed was extremely fast. In just a moment, he had already reached the front of the leader. At this time, that person had not had time. He summoned his own beast, and then was sent flying by Lin Yu's punch. The man flew for a long time before he fell so heavily to the ground. At this time, his heart was broken, and then others died on the spot. After Ye Hai saw this scene, his pupils were full of fear. People around him saw Lin Yu's methods were so powerful. At this moment, they were looking at each other like this, look at me, I look at you, the look in your eyes is full of fear. My lord, may I ask where we offended you? Even if you want to kill us, you should let us die clearly, right? Lin Yu heard it. After the man finished saying this, a sneer appeared on the corner of his mouth, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. I want you to understand clearly, right? Okay, I don't need to say more about what Ye Tian did today. I think you should also know. I think you should also understand who he killed in the first place. Lin Yu spoke unhurriedly, and the smile at the corner of his mouth became more and more obvious. After hearing what Lin Yu said, those around him looked at each other in confusion. You looked at me, I looked at you, and then I swallowed like this. Master Qi, what did that guy do? We really don't know, and we hope you can find out clearly. After Lin Yu heard what the guy said, the sneer at the corner of his mouth began to become more and more obvious, and then he shook his head. It seems like you really won't shed tears until you see the coffin, and you won't look back until you hit the wall. Since you want to die so much, it would really be unjustifiable if I don't help you today. After Lin Yu finished speaking, he suddenly rushed forward. At this time, he directly rounded his arms and punched the leader with a heavy punch. The man was directly knocked away, and finally fell heavily to the ground. A mouthful of blood spurted out from his mouth, and the corners of his eyes and brows were filled with endless fear. Lin Yu slowly walked up to that person, with a slight sneer on the corner of his mouth, and his eyes were full of mockery. Now it seems like it's time for you to tell me the truth. Lin Yu just spoke unhurriedly, and the sneer at the corner of his mouth became more and more obvious. In fact, they knew exactly what Ye Tian was going to do. After all, they were the ones who got the news, and Ye Tian also convened a family meeting. Lin Yu did this only after everyone agreed to it. So it was nonsense for them to say that they were completely unaware of what Lin Yu had done. All the people fell to their knees on the ground. In the face of absolute strength, they really didn't dare to have any rash intentions. "My lord, please calm down, please calm down. I know that I was wrong in this matter, so please spare me." At this time, Lin Yu heard what they said, and the sneer on the corner of his mouth became more and more obvious, and then he shook his head. "I spared you, right? But who of you spared the old man at the beginning? I didn't wrong you. I heard from the two of them that you all knew about it, so none of you can escape.